make sure to keep your Fragments of Silicon clean.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining as always are Petty and Galix. Right, let us get to the weekly updates of our so-called lives here. Starting with Galix this week, because you've been away.
Yes, I am back from my trip. Everything went well. We had a nice ceremony on Saturday, and then had a whole bunch of the people who were there because Grandpa was a minister and was just sort of generally a good and sociable guy, so a lot of people came to pay their respects. And they came back to the house to hang out for a bit. And it was also good to see my sister and her baby and my cousin and their two babies. Well, I guess one of them's not quite I don't know, he's still 2.5, which is a toddler, I guess. And it was good to spend some time somewhere else since I haven't really done that much in a while, and it was good to have a positive experience with that, so I might consider doing it again more.
What, going to memorials?
Going on family trips.
Oh.
I skipped a lot of those. Part of the reason is because usually when my family goes on vacation in the summer, they go for 2 weeks, and until recently, I didn't have anything like 2 weeks worth of vacation time. But I might try and go on more overnight trips in the future. We'll see. It was mostly the way I remembered it, which is good, and thankfully tourist season doesn't really start until next week, so it wasn't freaking overpacked. Yeah, that's, I guess, most of what I got going on. I just got back yesterday. So settling back in. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay. Well, Petty, you're up.
Do we want to start with the fun stuff or the not so fun stuff?
It's your call.
Well, I guess in fun news, I went to the Digimon TCG Regional over in Kansas this Saturday, and I took 7th place with my Galactamon deck. So, yay! I did actually pretty decent because it was a 32-person tournament.
Uh-huh.
So that was fun to get out of the house. Unfortunately, this week we had to put a feeding tube into Luna because she still has not been wanting to eat. The vet wanted to do a liver biopsy, but unfortunately we just don't have the money for that. Yeah, we basically had to pick one or the other. And, like, if it's just an infection, using the feeding tube will give her nutrients and stuff like that and make sure she gets her medicine in her, that will know it's an infection because she'll get better. If she doesn't, there's a possibility it is that she has cancer, and we will have to make the unfortunate decision.
Yeah,
So
it's never
basically,
easy. Never
God,
easy to make that choice.
no. It's like, I hope we don't have to. We're going to take it week by week and see how it goes from there. It's quite possible we could take her back next week and they could be looking to take the tube out and everything be right as rain. We could need another week, or she could get worse. It's one of those things we're just not going to know till it happens. My sister did start a GoFundMe to kind of help pay for Luna's medical bills. It's in the Discord, but I can throw it in Twitch chat for anybody hanging around there if they want to throw a few dollars to help Luna out. But yeah, that's I will say, trying to feed a cat with a feeding tube, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. Like, before Luna gets her pain meds, she wants to try and fight me. Which I guess that's good that she has the energy to fight me, but when I'm over here like, I'm trying to help you, and she's like, no, get that thing away from me, it's one of those things that I get why no one wants to have, syringes connected to a tube coming out of their neck and stuff being forced through them. So it's a pain in the ass, but hopefully it all works out for the better. And yeah, obviously, of course, this week, not really much in the gaming front because I've been keeping an eye on the Moon Kitten. So yeah, I think that's it for me, really.
Okay. Well, let's see. That means it's my go. And let's see. First up, my mother had most of her heart exams. Uh, okay. Now, that is to say, so for the stress test, she only took half of it because she ended up drinking some energy drink, and it turns out that blew the test. She asked me before if I could go get a can of Monster, you know, to wake her up. And I asked, "Are you sure? Like, you can have caffeine?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not for this test. Only it was for this test." I'm like, so now she owes $200 to them.
Womp womp.
Yeah, she's not very happy about it.
See, it's one of those. It wouldn't be as funny if this was like a thing outside of her control.
I know, I know, I know. Like,
Like, if the office suddenly had a closure and then they're trying to make her pay the 200, that would be a go fuck them. But actively taking an energy drink when you shouldn't is a womp womp.
I'm aware. Like, I just flat out told her that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't happy. Wasn't happy at that response. But like, I warned her. Because I have had, I haven't had these tests, but I've had tests where they are very explicit in you cannot have things before you take the test.
Mm-hmm.
That's my blood. That like blood tests.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of which, I have to get over the summer. Not looking forward to that, but I never do.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose the bright side here is she has 60 days to pay it before it gets sent to collections. So, I told her to just wait a couple of months. There's no rush to pay it either. I'm a bit more concerned about how valid the test is all the testing is going to be without that missing piece.
Right.
Because she hasn't gone back to her regular doctor yet for the results, and once again they might declare the whole thing null and void. I don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
just see what happens next week there. Outside of that, also some repairs have had to be done around here. In that a plug needed to be replaced, which also contains like a safety feature for one of the circuits. It's a bit weird.
Oh, like electrical outlet, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Oh, because when you said plug, I meant like drain plug?
No. An electrical outlet.
Yeah, it's one of those regional differences.
Yes, I suppose so. Point is that needed to be replaced, as well as some floor repairs. Now, that's the super's responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like, outside of that, biggest thing here is the anticipation of the summer, which means seeing a lot more of my niece and nephews.
Oh boy.
Yeah, well, somebody's got to take care of them while my brother works.
Mm-hmm.
And, that person ends up being me. So, it's all right. And just, how do I put this? Somewhat hard to connect with kids. Like,
Yeah, I get that.
you know, but you try to make the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, I'm sorry I don't go on adventures with him, but that's my brother's job. Like,
Right.
so, that's my news for the week. So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is Dr. Sharkie, PhD of 5 years now.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. No problem. Right. So we should get into it. By because I remember you talking about your past in quite colorful terms when we're setting all this up. And indeed, we tend to like to start our interviews by getting to know a person's background. So I suppose we should start the journey at the beginning, so to speak, in that what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Sure, sure. I guess going back to when I was about 4 or 5 years old, way back, I was getting into real-time strategy games. That's sort of what my dad played, and he got me into. I got my first, I think it was a Windows 95 computer when I was 5 years old, and we had them all connected up so we could play LAN games together, whether that was StarCraft 1 or Warcraft 2, some of those earlier games, Age of Empires, etc. And even some more obscure ones like Impossible Creatures, which are all great fun. I don't know if you guys have played some of those other ones.
I have Impossible Creatures installed, but I haven't played it yet.
Mm.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I think I
Yeah,
have
so
that on disc.
yeah, I think I still have the original CD for that one. So that's where that all began, and I think I mostly played real-time strategy games up until I was an early teenager. I hadn't really played much of anything else, whether that was first-person shooters or anything like that. Played a bit of the 4x strategy games and stuff. I guess that's sort of adjacent to RTS. Um, then yeah, I guess skipping forward, I was really into persistent browser-based games at one point, like Kings of Chaos and games similar to that. Um, and then I naturally went into studying computer science at university off the back of all that. Not so much for game development, more so just I just had a natural affinity for IT.
Hmm.
And then I guess career-wise, I started. I finished my degree, and then I started doing an honors degree. That was in telehealth service evaluation, which I thought was an interesting space. And naturally, I went into teaching for about 5 years at that point. I did the honors degree, started my doctorate in digital health, sometimes referred to health informatics. And while I was studying that, I taught at university for 5 years, taught IT and project management, things like that. And then I moved into a team at the university that was working on migrating from one student management system to another. So, I mean, this university is one of the oldest in Australia, going back almost 100 years. So we had to migrate over 100 million student records and staff data and all that sort of stuff from one system to another system. So I did that for 2 years. Then then the pandemic hit naturally, 2020. So I was looking for remote work at that point because I was like, I don't really want to go back to the office if that becomes a thing again, which it did. And I went to a company called Section.io, which was an edge computing company. So they did a lot of delivering content at the closest point of presence to the physical location of the user. So sort of like a CDN, but there's a lot more you could do with it. And we had a sort of modular system there where you could have um, different software, I guess, applied to your configuration, whether that was like a web application firewall or maybe it's image optimization, all these different sort of things you can put onto your config in front of your website. I did that for 2 years. I was a senior solutions engineer there. Had a lot of enterprise customers and small customers all over the world, but I took care of all the customers in the Asia Pacific region. Um, and then I moved on to a company called Polymos.io, which was a blockchain company doing. It was sort of it was designed for Web3 video games, and a lot of those are quite terrible, to be honest. And this platform that they had was essentially these Web3 games have their in-game items are NFTs, and then through our platform you can borrow or lend these NFTs to other players. Uh, Turns out that model is super flawed in the sense that the gas fees alone for those transactions pretty much consumes any possible revenue you can make from the borrowing and lending model anyway. Um, but I joined this company at a time where Section.io was about to be acquired and they had 2 rounds of layoffs. They convinced me, a recruiter reached out and said, do you want to build a team for us over here? Lead the technical team, hire a bunch of people, take over the platform that was being built by an agency here in Sydney. And so that was quite appealing. I didn't know anything about blockchain going into it, and I've sort of left quite jaded afterwards. I wouldn't go back to that industry again. Um, and so I
I
was
mean,
made redundant. Sorry, go on.
does an industry even still exist to go back to? Like,
Oh, it does, but it's very fragmented. I think there's a lot of copium in that industry. There's a lot of people that think this is the next big thing, but I think they're very much in an echo chamber from what I've seen.
well, I
So I
mean,
don't. Yeah.
more to the point, where the wider world is concerned, even like the crypto market, NFTs are last year's news. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
you
It was a passing fad. A lot of people got scammed, and then there's a bunch of I guess a lot of these games also are scams, and there's a few
yeah,
people that think they can make a quick buck, and it's just there's not much going on in that space. It's just an echo chamber of people thinking this is the next big thing, and we're too early, is what they always say.
I
When
mean, but
really there is no interest.
right. I mean, the fundamental premise was you can own a digital picture of something somehow. I don't know. It's like I never really understood the appeal. Like, but
Yeah,
like NFTs are definitely a thing of the past for the most part. like right now, the big hype / concern / thing that will devour humanity is generative AI. But that is perhaps something for another day.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, no, it's an interesting space. I definitely wouldn't work in it again. Um, I think firstly the Web3 games are rubbish, most of them. There's some that sort of show some promise, but there's a lot of over promising, under delivering, and I think that's just the whole model of taking people's money, really. Invest in us and we're going to produce a good game. And they have just enough there to make it look like it's a good game, but they never actually deliver on it, but they still take your money, of course. And that's sort of that just whole model around that. So once I finished up at Polymos.io, which was last November, I thought, well, this is an opportunity now. I have a break from the working world for a bit, and I'll do what I've always really wanted to do, which was make a video game. And that's when I got started on Ascending Realms around November, December. And really, I've worked on it since January through to, I guess, about a month or so ago, about 6 days a week, 10 hours a day to get the sort of the core gameplay and everything done. To the point where now I'm looking for the next job and I can work on it at a more relaxed pace, I guess. It isn't a real hurry or anything to get it out the door.
Mm. And how was your first developmental experience that didn't involve web scams?
Yeah, I guess back at the university when I joined that sort of that major project, the student migration one, I was hired as a full stack developer, and so I was working on essentially the replacements for the student forms that they had on the old website, and they needed a bunch of new forms on the new website, and that was for things like students submitting. I'm not sure what they call them in the US, but sort of misadventure forms where if a student has been sick and missed an exam, then you'd submit a form to be processed and approved or rejected, uh, all those sort of things. And so that was sort of a PHP backend. Front end was, I think it was Angular JS. I think that's quite a while ago now. Might have even been jQuery. But that was an interesting system. I'd been working in PHP since I was about 12 years old. I was self-taught back then, and then obviously I went through university and learned a lot more about programming and data structures and algorithms and all that. Um, so yeah, that was sort of my intro to programming in the real world.
Hmm. I was talking more about your first game development experience. Like,
Yeah, sure. Oh, I guess that was in PHP as well. That was I made a few persistent browser-based games around 2008. It would have been. So I was inspired by like Kings of Chaos and there's a few other ones. Stargate Wars. Some of them still going now. All these years later, I don't think they quite have as many players as they did back then, but they're still around. Some of them. So I made a game loosely based on Lord of the Rings. So essentially, it's sort of like I guess a spreadsheet type of game. You had your your website interface, which was you have X amount of soldiers. Can recruit more once you've got enough resources. There was like a cron job that ran every 30 minutes that essentially gave you more turns, and you could use turns to attack other players and beat down their army, steal their resources, or upgrade your own army and recruit more units. And that was sort of my first intro to game development. Not nothing with anything impressive, I don't think. But that was the sort of the very first sort of what you could consider being a video game that I had worked on.
right. And I suppose that leads us up to The Last of the Nine Lives, which seems to be your first commercial work.
Yeah, so that was, I guess, when you're browsing the internet and Reddit and all that, a lot of the advice is just make a project with a small scope and just get it done. As your first game. Doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be anything super interesting or innovative. So I thought, right, I'm going to make something that's super simple. I mean, I didn't expect it to be popular or anything, and it's it's sold like 20 copies to date, I think, and that's fine by me. It was more so I also wanted to learn how to use the Steam SDK, all that sort of the stuff on the Steamworks side, and find out what the pitfalls were with using that, which there are a few. If you've never done it before, which I'm glad that I had gone through that with The Last of the Nine Lives before doing Ascending Realms, because I'm sure I would have fell into some of those traps, which could be a problem. So yeah, that was sort of. I'd been working in Game Maker for a few months. I'd been making like an idle game originally, which was sort of had a Warcraft 2 aesthetic to it, but scope creep just kept getting in there. Kept getting this small project I originally wrote down on a couple pages. Eventually ended up being like a 20-page project. I'm like, no, I just need to stop here. I'm never going to get a game out. So that's why I went back to the drawing board and started making the Last of the Nine Lives, which was basically a 48-hour project. And yeah, that also taught me how to use the Steamworks. They got the API for controller support, which is kind of cool because just by adding that to your game, you suddenly open it up to 200 plus game controllers very easily. And I thought that's incredibly cool.
Indeed. And how to frame this? What lessons do you think you learned out of Last of the Nine Lives that helped you prepare for the much bigger project that we're about to talk about here?
Um, I think it's interesting. I guess I've made it in the Game Maker engine, and I've carried that through to Ascending Realms using Game Maker. I have dabbled in Godot and Default in Unity. I mean, there's been the whole drama with the Unity business model and stuff, so I sort of cautioned myself from going towards that route. Um, so I think Game Maker I think it was a solid engine. I think it's really underrated, particularly for 2D games. I mean, some people have made 3D games in it, but it's really not tailored towards that. Um, but I also think, as a programmer with a lot of experience, I feel like Game Maker is really good for strong developers. I mean, they say it's aimed at beginner game devs, but I really think it really shines with their GML game maker language that they have, which is sort of like somewhere between Python and JavaScript is probably the best way to describe it. It's very powerful with what it can do. Um, the real challenges I think that I discovered with The Last of the Nine Lives is that when it comes to user interface stuff, it's very naive in that area. There's not much there to help you. Um, like moving in from Last of the Nine Lives to Ascending Realms, simple things like a checkbox in the settings menu. I had to create a checkbox from scratch. that they just it doesn't exist. I think it does now in the new release that's just come out, new update from the Game Maker beta. But simple things like that, input fields, buttons, you have to make all of that from scratch. So the UI stuff can be quite time consuming. So I've made a lot of my own libraries, and there are libraries out there that people share that you can use for the interface stuff with Game Maker, but I just sort of wanted to do it all myself, which I have.
I mean, if it works for you, go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm presuming that you're using Game Maker on Ascending Realms here.
Yep, correct.
And I suppose, speaking of that, this is a good transition to talking about this game properly. Starting with, what is Ascending Realm?
So Ascending Realms is it's heavily inspired by a game by Sensible Software from 1991 called Megalomania, or I think in North America it was Tyrants Fight Through Time. um, which was a very early real-time strategy game that sort of had auto battler sort of combat. So you would have level divided up into different sectors, and then you'd send a bunch of your units to another sector to conquer that sector, um, and eventually you'd capture all the sectors and wipe out your opponent. Um, so it's very much inspired by that. So it's got that sort of real-time strategy element to it, and then the auto battler sort of combat, but with a lot of the quality of life kind of features you'd expect in a more modern type of RTS game. So essentially, I guess the story behind it is there's the world of Resnara, what I've called it, and there's the two playable factions. There's the Ironclad Pack, which have a belief in science and technology, and then there's the other faction is the Arcane Talon, which use magic. And so they have opposed ideas about what is the best way forward for humanity, more or less. And then there's elements from other games. So there's a third faction, which is a non-player controlled faction, which are called the Primal Beasts. And they're sort of similar to Warcraft 3, how you have different units around the map that are, neutral units that you can attack and get loot from and things like that. So it's very much inspired by Megalomania for the overall sort of core gameplay loop. And then there's a lot of inspiration from, I guess, the aesthetic of the game is inspired by Warcraft 2. There are hero units in the game, which is sort of inspired by Warcraft 3 and the neutral units. And yeah, there's buildings and stuff that provide different buffs and benefits as well if you control the sector that those buildings are in. And there's a lot that is going to be built out over time.
Makes sense. Okay, so any sort of auto chess influence in this game?
Yeah, I guess a little bit. I haven't had I haven't really played a huge amount of auto chess, or Dota Underlords or those sort of games. I have always liked. There was a mod in StarCraft 2 or a map in StarCraft 2. I think it was called Nexus Wars, which was sort of the back and forth tug of war style of battle of attrition, um, which I think I've always liked that concept of you don't have to micromanage the units. You just sort of do this macro level of management, and upgrade those units. So I guess there is that sort of inspiration and blending that with the real-time strategy sort of components, I think makes for a compelling experience. And I think what Megalomania did back in 1991 is we haven't seen anything quite like that since. There are games that are similar, but I don't think there's anything that is quite the same. And I'm not trying to go for the same with my own game. It's definitely inspired by it, but not a recreation of it.
And in terms of the units, so you've mentioned that they have the philosophical differences that bring them into conflict, but are they two sides of the same coin in terms of mechanics and units and all that jazz?
Yeah, there's definitely similarities. Like starting off, right now there's going to be more units in the future, but currently, you've got one melee unit for both factions, and you've got one ranged unit for both factions, and I think that was enough for at least to get the demo out there and to start getting feedback from people. I guess where they have points of difference is the stats of the individual units are definitely different, and it's going to be an ongoing challenge, I think, to balance the gameplay. Some units are naturally going to be stronger than others in certain aspects, and the technology tree in the game will play a big part in how, I guess, it adds a lot more depth to the gameplay. I think my ultimate aim for the gameplay is to sort of replicate the sort of depth you get out of Warcraft 3 or a game like Dota 2, where it's quite easy to learn but hard to master. And I think there's a lot of depth you can add through the technology tree, such as the archers on the Ironclad pack have an incendiary arrow upgrade. So when they hit a unit, the unit catches on fire for a few seconds. Things like that. And then there's like some of the hero units have like a chain lightning spell. So all these sort of things sort of add a bit more to the depth of the game. And there's also the day-night cycle as well, where currently when it's nighttime, all units have double the amount of evasion. And there's going to be more things I'll add in the future. But I think all these different things add different, I guess, pros and cons of when you want to deploy units to an enemy sector and try and conquer it. There's also the fog of war when there's nighttime over your mini map, so you can't actually see what's in any sectors you don't have any units in.
Hmm. And how are you going about introducing that complexity to the game?
I think it's definitely an incremental approach. It's hard. You got to, I think, add small things at a time, get player feedback, and then see if it actually works or if people actually enjoying those features. I mean, as long as the simplicity of the game doesn't, I don't take that away by adding too many things too quickly. Then I think I'm on the right track because I think it's very easy to. I could just add 20 units to each faction, um, and just not really do anything interesting with them. Like I think that what makes Warcraft 3 super interesting is the each unit has the different abilities attached to them or passives, and that is something that I'll plan to add to more to future units that are added to the game, both for the playable factions and the non-playable faction.
Hmm. And are you the only developer on Ascending Realm?
Yep, that's right. Yep, solo dev.
As I thought. And does that cover all aspects?
Yeah, absolutely everything from the I guess the company website. I did a whole revamp of that a few months ago, and that you can see the patch logs for both games there.
Mhm.
And I will put together a website specifically for Ascending Realms at some point. Um, the only parts that I have outsourced was I paid a music composer to do six original soundtracks for the game,
Mhm.
which currently three of them are in the demo, and the other three are coming in the next patch. And then I had an artist do the capsule art and the sort of the Steam promotional art for the store page, um, which I'm absolutely blown away by the quality of his work. That was really good, and he did that all within 2 weeks, which I was super impressed with.
Well, that's good. And yeah, that's about what I figured as well, since um, in our experience, typically if there's a part of the game that a developer didn't cover, it's going to be the music, because that requires its own particular skill set.
Yeah, definitely. So there's the music, and I guess there's also some of the artwork I've done myself, but most of it is assets I've paid for from artists on itch.io.
Mhm.
Um, so I've done the buildings, which probably look like they've been done by me, the town hall and the farm that are currently in there. And I'm probably going to have another go at doing those because I haven't really done any pixel art before, but I did have fun drawing those. Um, but other than that, yeah, those I think you got to know what you should outsource, where your weaknesses are, and just you probably can do the stuff that where your strengths lie, depending on time constraints and things like that. Because some things will naturally take longer than others, um, such as doing pixel art yourself. But for the most part, I've done all the programming myself, and that is by far the biggest part of this game. I think I was a bit naive going into it, how complex it would be doing a real-time sort of strategy game. I thought it might be simpler, um, just because of the style of game with the auto battler component, but that definitely adds its own layer of complexity.
Hmm. That's that's a common refrain on this program. Probably the most common refrain. Like, the thing that I wanted to develop for turned out to be a lot more complicated than what I initially thought. It, it never fails. Um, with that aside, when did the game launch in early access?
So it hasn't launched yet. I'm not sure when I'm going to launch it. I did a Kickstarter campaign. I thought I'd have a go at that. I had a bit of a following, not quite enough to get it over the line and get the funding. But if it had been funded, then I would have probably had it up in the next. It would have been this month, probably by the end of the month, at the rate I was developing features. If I could continue, if I had the ability to keep working on it sort of full time, I probably would have reduced my workload from 6 days a week to 5 days a week, just to not burn myself out. But it would have been out probably this month, and then um, most of the features that I had put into that sort of Kickstarter campaign probably would have been done within 12 months, to be honest. I was working at a rather rapid pace, and most of the hard part has been done at this point. It's always the stuff that I guess you don't necessarily expect it to take the longest, but trying to support all the different resolutions and things like that and what that involves. The game currently supports from 720p all the way up to 4K. And I'm sure there's some issues in there that I probably haven't caught, but the main thing is getting that working right, and the FPS limiter, and then having the animations actually stay consistent across no matter what frame rate people have set the game to. Um, and then I've added things like it's been localized into 34 languages, which I sort of have a Google sheet where I have a column with the English sort of terminology all through that. And then there's a script behind all that, which then automatically calls the Google Translate API to put it into all the other different languages. And that's been quite effective in getting that part of the game done. And I think as a result, the demo has been most played in China, which I think is quite interesting. I didn't know where it would potentially be played from, but the top three are China, the US, and Germany currently for the demo.
Hmm. And what's been the response?
I think it's been positive. It's definitely slow moving. I think the next update will be important. The next update's going to be a big update for the demo, and I'm hoping that will drive more sort of wish lists and get a bit more momentum. But there is like a game trailer up on YouTube, and that's received several thousand views. I can't remember how many exactly, but it's had like a 98% positive rating of a couple hundred ratings. So I think time will tell. I wasn't sure if it would take off from the get go. Some games do, some games don't. Um, but we'll see. Maybe I'm going to get the nostalgia crowd that played Megalomania, nearly 30 years ago. We'll take a look. I don't know.
Possibly. Though, gotta admit that, your particular homage is a very deep cut, as they say. Like, not sure how many people are nostalgic for Megalomania, but I suppose we will see in due time.
Yeah.
And what does the roadmap look beyond that update, if you can delve on those details?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think for the demo, I think instant action mode that's going to stay for the demo, and into the early access launch when that does eventually happen. I think I think in terms of showing off new features to players, I think I'm going to keep the demo up to date with every new update for as long as I can, for as long as what's feasible, I guess. So people will be able to try out new units in the demo and new features in the demo. But beyond the demo and sort of looking at that roadmap up to early access launch, at a minimum, I'm looking to do a skirmish mode, so you'll be able to choose from several different official maps, and then choose the sort of starting parameters for those maps, what resources that you and the computer opponent start with, whether heroes are enabled, disabled, a whole bunch of different toggles and stuff. And I would eventually like to do a procedurally generated like map generator, sort of similar to what was in Command and Conquer Tiberian Sun when you'd play a skirmish mode. I think that would be quite cool. And then other support for the skirmish mode would be Steam Workshop support. So I want to make the game customizable by people so they can uh, eventually mod it using Lua scripting and change things to how they want it to be, or create their own maps. Um, whether that's in a JSON format or maybe something similar to that, with a map editor, which I'd probably do as a separate application, I think, just to make that a bit easier to do the UI for. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a campaign mode. That is something I think it really depends on how popular the game is over the next several months as it's being developed and more features are added. If it starts getting some momentum, then a campaign would definitely be on the cards. I also would like to do a game mode called Ascension Conquest, which is definitely something that I want to have for the early access launch, which would be similar to Dawn of War 2's The Last Stand mode, where you choose a hero, go into an arena and try to survive for X amount of waves, get experience from that run, and then as your character levels up, which is persistent between runs, you unlock new items that are available, and then you can mix and match the different items on your hero to try out different sort of builds and see what works best. So I think that would be really cool to add. And I'd also like to add a sandbox mode at some point, which might just be 2 different sectors, and you can spawn as many units as you like into that map of units and buildings and see how the different buffs interact. And really, it's really just a sandbox mode for people to play around and do whatever they like. And there is already a developer console in the game, and I'll have to add the ability to spawn units and buildings to that soon as well, which I think is a lot of fun. And then in terms, I guess, interesting tech features, I want probably the next update, in fact, will have Linux support. And eventually I want to support the Steam Deck and controllers. I need to do a bit of research on how exactly controllers are used in these sort of games, because I've don't think I've ever played an RTS or an auto battler using a controller, so I'll have to do some research to see how exactly that might be done. And then adding things like the Steam Cloud Save and persistent stats for use on Steam, I think would be very good to have.
Well, it sounds like quite an extensive series of updates planned for the future. Certainly, on the and potentially beyond the release of early access and up to 1.0. Anyway, I suppose my final question at this stage is: have you given any thought to price point when the game comes out in early access?
Yeah, I think about $20 Australian is probably reasonable for this sort of game. Um, which I think for most of the world that would be quite reasonable. That'd be a bit cheaper in the US, I think, over there, and there might be some regions where it might need to be slightly lower or some sort of small discount applied, like Brazil, where games are that bit more expensive for them. But yeah, and I think about $20 Australian, which I'm not sure what that is right now in US dollars, but I think that's a reasonable price point.
Apparently, it's 60 about $12.86 in US dollars.
Yeah, that sounds quite good. I think that's a reasonable price point. I think for this sort of game, I think beyond 1.0, if it did gain some sort of popularity or even a cult following, then multiplayer is definitely on the cards. Whether that's PvP or even PvE in terms of the Ascension Conquest mode, I think it'd be fun to play that with friends. Maybe you play co-op with 2 other friends. So yeah, no, I think $20 Australian is a reasonable price.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, well, let me see. I'll Petty Gollix, do you have anything further for our guest?
I think I'm good.
Yes, I think you've covered everything that came up to me.
Very good. Right. So, Dr. Sharkle, I want to thank you for being with us here today and talking all about your career and your game. Um, it certainly looks promising. and we look forward to seeing it launch in early access whenever that might be. But in the meantime, the game is Ascending Realms. You can find it on Steam, which means you can go and wishlist it today. Right, so Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, so welcome to the topic of discussion. So this week we are talking about first parties going third party. And not necessarily in a historical context either. No, this is quite timely. Because now, while the conversation is mainly centered around Microsoft, Sony's also here as well. Like, certainly less so than Microsoft, and in certain cases at practical gunpoint. To wit, MLB The Show appearing on the Switch and the Xbox ecosystem was apparently the call of the MLB and not the Sony.
Mm-hmm.
All indications seem to be the MLB basically forced Sony to make multi-platform games for their baseball franchise. And there's also Sony's PC initiative, which people seem to fundamentally misunderstand. Now, granted, Sony themselves haven't been doing a great job with the PC platform lately with the forced PSN integration. It's not so much forced PSN usage anymore. It's actually optional.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, like, the games are still getting region locked.
Yeah, like in particular, Helldivers 2, it does not go through PlayStation servers, but you still need a PlayStation account to use it.
Right.
So all but 50 countries now can play the game when it was originally worldwide.
Right. And, this is affecting things up to the very recently announced port of Stellar Blade, which is facing the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
And Stellar Blade, by the way, is a single player only game.
yes. Once again, like, we don't know why Sony just upped and decided to start forcing this requirement, because Sony's been publishing PC games since like 2018.
Yeah.
And I played a bit of Days Gone on my new laptop here to give it the rounds, to see what kind of power performance this thing can get, and I didn't require a PSN account to use that.
Mm-hmm. Well, like, I could see for Helldivers for like helping to facilitate crossplay.
Mm-hmm.
But for Stellar Blade, you don't even get PSN achievements. There is absolutely zero reason to need a PlayStation account for that whatsoever.
Yes. Right, but it's not too different from what Microsoft does on PC as well.
Well, I'm remembering Halo 2. Specifically the Vista port back in the day.
Okay, that was an atrocity of a different sort.
It was, and still very similar at the same time, because you actually had to have Xbox Live Gold to use the multiplayer. Sony isn't requiring PlayStation Plus to like use Helldivers multiplayer, for example.
That wasn't the big controversy, mainly because Game for Windows Live multiplayer lasted like 2 weeks because it turns out, trying to charge for multiplayer on a platform that was built off of free multiplayer
Yeah, they were at the
was
time 15 years too late to try that experiment.
yeah. Like, it died a very quick death, and it's never been brought up since.
Well, except for people like us to laugh at it, because again, they were 15 years too late for that experiment.
Right. But getting to the main event here, and that is Microsoft. Specifically Xbox. Because, this is different than Activision continuing to be multi-platform, or even Bethesda, because these were multi-platform publishing outfits.
And like Activision still has some contractual obligations.
Well, it's not just contractual obligations; it's regulatory obligations.
Right.
Because one of the big things Microsoft needed to concede in order to get take control of Activision was not restricting Activision games to the Xbox ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
That specifically Call of Duty, and that is a decade-long pledge.
Right.
Or so even if they wanted to, they can't bring Call of Duty Black Ops 7, I think, to just the Xbox. Because of that requirement. But even if, like, Call of Duty is too big of a brand to have just in the Xbox swimming pool, and that's a precedent that goes all the way back to Minecraft.
Mm-hmm.
Minecraft was really the first big franchise that was bigger than anything Microsoft had outside of a few key franchises, and even then, granted, even pre Microsoft, Minecraft was big. It's just ever since the acquisition, Minecraft has been at completely stratospheric.
Mm-hmm.
But the outcome is exactly the same. These games did not get locked to Microsoft's platforms.
Yeah, Microsoft could have, after the contract was done with Sony and Nintendo for like PS4 and Wii U, they had no obligation to send it to make a Switch version or a PS5 version of Minecraft, but they did anyway.
Right. Yes. Yes, they did. As opposed to, well, other potential franchises had they continued.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was their spate of developer acquisitions, and they tried to keep Bethesda games exclusive to Microsoft Xbox platforms for a time.
The hilarity that was Starfield.
Yes.
That it's
I'm not
still
sure
an
hilarity
awful...
was.
Huh?
I'm not sure hilarity is the word I would use for Starfield. More like endlessly long blandness.
It's still awful. Like, laughably awful.
No, it's white noise awful.
Like you point and laugh at it because it's bad, not like, haha, this is enjoyable.
No, I fundamentally disagree with that. This is dull as dishwater. This is a fucking white wall of a video game. It's not funny. It's just boring. That was that game's cardinal sin. Those are two very different reasons for sucking.
Fair enough. And it doesn't help that it was completely outclassed by the Outer Lands, I believe it was called.
The Outer Worlds?
Outer Worlds, yes.
I don't think those came out at the same time, but I get your point.
Outer Worlds came out first and was just an all-around better game.
Well, yeah. That's like that's the difference between Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3. Obsidian has better writers. But we're getting off track here.
Fair.
I'll note that Starfield, as far as I know, is still locked to the Xbox. Or did
Yep.
that get announced for PlayStation?
If it did, it went across like a lead balloon, because I have not heard anything about PlayStation version.
I mean, that's kind of where Starfield is more than anything else.
Yeah.
Now, it's like, anyway, refocusing on the main entity here, we're talking about Xbox Game Studios. This is the first party Xbox developer and publisher. Always has been. This is the one that has the continuity with Microsoft Game Studios and Microsoft Studios, and so on and so forth. This is the entity that still owns Rare after nearly 25 years.
This is equivalent to like Nintendo's R&D1 or Sony's insert whatever their main dev studio is. I think is it Santa Monica? Or was that the recently closed one?
Not the dev studio, their publishing arm. It's in the name. This is the one that's supposed to be making games for Xbox. But and I think this might have been a directive from higher than God, what's the guy's name who runs Microsoft Games now?
I do not remember.
Yeah, like this could have come from the Microsoft CEO, I suspect, because they're pushing Game Pass, and it's believed that Game Pass is the reason why Xbox is that and the absolutely dire amount of Xboxes they've been selling in recent times.
Last gen was not good for Xbox.
Yep.
Because God, did they screw that up.
Well, and I imagine this is why we're talking about it in this context, because to me, you're not, like, it doesn't, like, it's a step towards it, but you're still a first-party publisher if you still produce a platform yourself. Excuse me, I need to cough.
Right.
But I do understand that Microsoft, even with that, they might have a slightly different opinion on that, since they produce PCs and stuff, and you can already play almost every Xbox game on PC. So,
well, right, and also the guy I was thinking of is Phil Spencer.
Oh, he's still there? I thought he left.
No, he got promoted. He's the head of Microsoft Gaming. Like, he's the overall boss. But the thing you mentioned, Galax, does actually have precedence. It's just you have to go way back to the golden age / what Wikipedia calls the second generation. Although that term is a bit dubious, because console generations were a lot blurrier back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Because the Intellivision and the Atari 2600 technically like a different generation than the ColecoVision, maybe. Like, I'm not sure how you measure that, but the interesting thing about that period of time is you had all the first parties making games for other platforms. Atari had Atari Soft, Mattel had the M Network, and Coleco, had Coleco. And, main focus there was actually the Atari 2600. Because the Atari 2600 had a 10 million wide user base by that point in time. At least at least that's the number I've seen quoted. Whereas like the Intellivision had 2 million. So Mattel's thinking was, there's a lot of players of games over there. Maybe we should make games for that platform and get more money that way. Which was apparently a controversial opinion among the Blue Sky Rangers. Not surprising. But I bring this up because this is exactly the rationale that Microsoft is using to bring its games to different platforms. Like, unlike Sony, it's not being done with a gun to its head. Microsoft is freely releasing, not just the stuff we mentioned last year, Grounded and Sea of Thieves, but they've continued the trend. We've had Gears of War E-Day announced day and date for the PlayStation 5, along the other versions. Forza Horizon 5 arrived on the PlayStation 5 last month, and apparently is actually doing really well on PlayStation 5. I'm sure there's a vast amount of irony here.
Well, it's also because the what's it called? Gran Turismo for PS5 kind of sucked.
I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is apparently Forza Horizon 5 was the second best-selling game in North America last month. We are talking physical sales, I believe. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I think Circana now measures digital sales outside of Nintendo. But, the point is, the only thing that sold better than Forza Horizon 5 is The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, the remake. Which, once again, it's surreal to see Microsoft having, huge success on PlayStation. Mind you, these numbers are not just PlayStation technically, but in the case of Forza Horizon 5, what else is giving the boost? It's been out on other platforms for ages. Like, apparently its sales rank the month prior was 42. So, yeah, Microsoft got a huge boost from the PlayStation ecosystem. Apparently, especially in Europe, I haven't seen like actual numbers out of that any place there, but there's a theory that because Sony is so strong in Europe, this is the first time that a lot of Euro players are experiencing like rare games. This is where they're playing Sea of Thieves. And the trend is continuing with just today they announced that Hellblade 2 is coming to PlayStation 5. So there are a few unknowns here because Microsoft hasn't explicitly stated that every game ever is coming to the PlayStation. Like Avowed and South of Midnight or Song of Midnight.
South of Midnight is the new one.
Yeah, there we go. South of Midnight.
The Southern Adventure game.
Yeah. The one that's developed by Canadians but takes place in New Orleans. Like, point is, those are still Xbox only, in terms of consoles for now. Like, but at some point they may become PlayStation 5 game. But the bigger question is, how far back will this policy go? Because there have been rumors that Halo: The Master Chief Collection is purportedly in development for the PlayStation 5, but also maybe in developmental trouble.
I mean, really, what game that's come out in the last few years hasn't been in developmental trouble?
Well, the Master Chief Collection is a special case.
Yeah.
And like I said, we don't know if like the Forza Horizon remake, the game, what they called just, Forza Motorsport. Forza Motorsport 2023, if that is going to appear on the PlayStation 3, or if that's a little too late. I guess we'll find out in the not too distant future. If only because Forza Motorsport and Forza Horizon live on borrowed time in the digital landscape. Mainly because everything is licensed. They can.
Whenever insert car manufacturer decides, you know what, we don't want you to use our license anymore, they either have to remove all of those vehicles or can no longer sell the game.
Right. And this is what happens to car games on the regular. Unless you didn't use licensed cars.
Yeah, like the Burnout series, which makes close facsimiles to real life cars, but they are not.
Right, but that's the reason why you can get Burnout Paradise remastered on Steam.
Yeah.
Or why you can buy Split Seconds, even though that game is about 15 years old.
Well, the almost issue with Paradise is also the music, but luckily EA got all the rights to that as well.
Yeah. So I guess, in the technical sense that, Microsoft is still a first party, but they've moved beyond the traditional first party designation as well. Like, once again, they are just flat out publishing games for the competition. No special caveats about it. And there is an additional wrinkle here, and that is the Nintendo Switch 2. Because, the rumor mill has been suggesting that Microsoft is going to bring its games to the Nintendo Switch 2. Like Forza Motorsport 5 has been rumored. Halo Master Chief Collection. I think there's a few others. But Microsoft has not yet confirmed anything. Like, The weird thing is they haven't even confirmed a Switch 2 version of Minecraft yet. I mean,
I forget,
they
was that
made
because they did list there's a list of Switch games that
Yeah.
were not compatible with Switch 2, and I'm not sure if Minecraft was on that list or not.
Minecraft is very much on the list, which means it may get a Switch 2 update.
Mm-hmm.
Like it depends on like Fortnite was in the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal direct. But we don't know if that means it's getting a dedicated Switch 2 version or it just needs a Switch 2 update. You know. But it's still conspicuous by its absence. Whatever route they choose, because you would think out of all of the Microsoft properties, Microsoft games that would be there day one, Minecraft would be there, but no. If Minecraft is coming, it's coming later on in the year,
Mm-hmm.
which is just kind of bizarre. Like, anyway, so that's where things lie at this point. And I suppose you still have the extra special aberration of Nintendo publishing mobile games, but that was a thing that was once again done very much against management's will. Their shareholders basically forced them at once again virtual gunpoint to make mobile games.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
But I'm pretty sure hell will freeze over before we see Mario on an Xbox or on a PlayStation.
yeah, or even a PC platform.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Nintendo has been the most consistent about this. Like, outside of some early licensing stuff, which had weird things like, Mario Brothers appearing on the Atari 7800 well after the NES had been released.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, that was a prior commitment, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or,
Well, and I mean, a lot of Nintendo's value is in their IPs, so.
yeah. Or, special licensing situations like with the CDI games or the Hudson obscure Japanese computer platform versions of Nintendo games. Once again, those were very special circumstances that aren't likely to be replicated.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that'll bring a close to this topic of discussion. And indeed, wrapping up another episode of the show itself. So, coming up on the week ahead, no Friday show this week. Sometimes that just happens. The Friday thing is is not every week, but we do have the season finale of MSP planned for right after this. So look forward to that. And coming up on the Sunday reviews, we'll be having reviews of Lego Brick Tales, Sargis, X Zodiac, and Black Fortress 2. So until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.